Hey there, everyone. This is Gregg Schutze for ReadyForTheDraft.com. This is the Ready for the Draft podcast, episode 10. Week 7 of the college football season already in the books. Teams have already played 6 games to this point. We're almost halfway through the college football season. We're midway through October. Hard to believe we're already at episode 10 of this podcast series. Seems like yesterday, episode 1, breaking down what to expect during the 2019 college football season. You blink and the season's going to be over. It's quite remarkable. Last episode, we talked about the quarterbacks, what to expect, in this draft class. Tua Tagovailoa, Justin Herbert, the top 2 quarterbacks, Joe Burrow making a push to possibly jump into that consideration to be a top quarterback taken in the draft. What happens with Jake Fromm after that? And then there's a group of 4 to 5 juniors that really have decisions to make. Do they decide to come out and battle for a potential first-round slot, or do they look at coming out next year, come back one more season for some development? Guys like Jacob Eason, guys like KJ Costello, who's been battling injury. Sam Ehlinger is another one. Jordan Love of Utah State had a breakout sophomore season. Junior year, has been kind of up and down. And so there's a lot to really think about there at the quarterback position. But now we're going to transition and really look at the wide receiver position, the playmakers down the football field. Now, when we talk about the wide receiver position, we're going to look at 20 receivers right now, but that's not even scratching the surface on the potential for this draft class. There are just so much talent at the wide receiver position in this year's draft class. And usually when you're talking about the draft class, you're talking about, the strength. Where is the strength? It's either, it's top heavy. A lot of the drafts are top heavy. If you have some guys up at the top, this year you have Jerry Jeudy, CeeDee Lamb, Henry Ruggs, all in consideration to be top 15 picks. T. Higgins, Laviska Shenault, Jalen Reagor, possibly even Tylan Wallace jumping into the first round consideration as well. And then you talk about, all right, well, what about day 2? There are plenty of day 2 guys that'll be drafted in the 2nd and 3rd rounds, from your DeVonta Smiths to your Collin Johnsons, Tyler Johnson as well. And then obviously there's even some draft depth on day 3. Day 3 is where you're going to find a lot of guys who end up making rosters and end up being huge surprises. So I think really when you look at this draft class, there's depth at all 3 levels of the draft. And I think that's what makes this draft class so special. At the top, is it going to be like the 2014 draft? The 2014 draft, if you recall, that's the year that Sammy Watkins, Mike Evans, Odell Beckham Jr., Brandon Cooks, Kelvin Benjamin all went all went in round number 1. We also got to see Jordan Matthews, Devontae Adams, Allen Robinson, Jarvis Landry. I mean, the list goes on and on with this draft class. So that was the 2014 draft. And then 2015, Amari Cooper, Devontae Parker, Nelson Aguilar, some guys that were making some plays. Then you have Tyler Lockett a little bit further down on day 2, making plays. Jamison Crowder, a steal at the top of day 3 in 2016. 2016 draft, little down year at the top. You had Corey Coleman, Will Fuller, Josh Doxson, Laquan Treadwell there in round number 1. But then it was all about rounds, 2, 3, where you really started seeing some playmakers. How about Sterling Shepard? Michael Thomas of the Saints was taken in the 16th pick in round number 2. Tyler Boyd out of Pittsburgh taken in round number 2. Braxton Miller had a couple of years there, but the Texans, he was drafted in round number 3, the former quarterback. So, I mean, as you look at these draft classes, there's talent to be found at all different levels. 2017, we had Corey Davis, Mike Williams, John Ross, all taken in the top 10 because the draft class, it really kind of dropped off in terms of the level of talent, or so we thought. Curtis Samuel, Juju Smith-Schuster, Cooper Kupp, all taken on day 2 in that draft. Oh, and don't forget, Chris Godwin was a 3rd round pick. Kenny Golladay, a 3rd round pick in that year's draft. D.D. Westbrook at the top of round number 4. And then 2018, DJ Moore, Calvin Ridley, the only first round picks. But then you had Cortland Sutton, Dante Pettis, Christian Kirk, Anthony Miller, James Washington, DJ Chark, Michael Gallup, all taken on day 2. All guys who have made impacts for their teams. So when you look at these draft classes, you look at some where not only the first round picks and the household names, the guys that everybody knows. You start doing your homework. You start looking for some of these other receivers, guys who will fit a particular offense, or a guy who may not be a burner, but a guy who is very dynamic, very sudden with the route running, a guy who just knows how to get open, excellent hands. Those are some of the things that you're going to look for, and guys that may slide a little bit in the draft. Look, Cooper Kupp was not the fastest guy. He ran a 4.6, but if you watched him in the one-on-ones at the Senior Bowl, nobody could cover this guy. I mean, it was ridiculous, and that translated to the next level. But teams still had some doubts, and he fell all the way to round number 3. Juju Smith-Schuster, he wasn't fast enough. He was a big physical guy, but he wasn't fast enough. Couldn't separate. We see what he's been able to do there for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So we'll take a look at this receiver class. We'll talk about exactly what we saw out of them. From there, we'll transition to what I saw in Week 7. So we'll take a look at some of the games that I've gotten to watch. And if you listen to my podcast, I try to watch as many games as possible. My goal is to watch at least one game for every FBS program, all 130, and I'm over 100 now. So I'm working my way, getting through the last few, so that I can go ahead and really break down every team and the draft eligible prospects for each team, along with some FCS schools as well. I've got that sprinkled in throughout my college football journey this season. And then finally, we'll take a look at the Week 8 matchups, games to watch out for. So without further ado, let's take a look at the top of this wide receiver class. And I'll tell you what, when you talk about the top, Jerry Jeudy is the guy that has to be the first name that comes to mind for everyone. 6'1", 192-pound junior. This season, 42 receptions, 538 yards, 6 touchdowns. A season ago, 19.3 yards per reception, 14 touchdowns, over 1,300 yards, was the Biletnikoff Award winner. A touchdown in his final 4 games. He's a guy who, you're looking for guys who usually have either, you see the vertical speed and a guy who can get vertical on you, or a guy who's very sudden in and out of his breaks. And you're talking about a guy like, say, Terry McLaurin. Not necessarily the fastest guy, but a guy who is very sudden in and out of his breaks, and a guy who knows how to get open. Versus some of the speed merchants on the outside, of Marquise Brown, a guy who's still working and still developing as a route runner, but a guy who can definitely get vertical on you. Jerry Jeudy can do both. And I think that's what makes him so special. And the other thing, too, is he's got other receivers. He's got Henry Ruggs Jr. and DeVonta Smith, who we'll be talking about here in just a little bit. But Jerry Jeudy blocks for these guys. He blocks on the outside to spring those receivers for extra yards. He's also blocking for Najee Harris. Very unselfish player. And I think that's one of the things that you definitely look for in a receiver. This is going to be a guy I think is going to be tough to dethrone when you're talking about the Biletnikoff Award. And he's very much in the running for a top 10 pick, possibly even a top 5 pick. I think Jerry Jeudy has that type of talent, and he's just a guy who knows how to get open. But there's a big but there. And a couple of weeks ago, I talked about this guy and said that he was consistent. He had scored a touchdown in every game so far, during the season, but he hadn't been utilized really to the extent that he was capable of. And I'll tell you what, against his next 2 games, against Kansas and then against Texas, CeeDee Lamb. I'll tell you what, guy has proven to be a number 1 wideout for the next level. A guy who is challenging Jerry Jeudy for that number 1 wide receiver role. 6'2", 191 pounds. And a guy in that Texas game reminded you, he was doing some Julio Jones type of things out there. I mean, he's not as big as Julio Jones, but 10 receptions, 171 yards, 3 touchdowns in that game. When you think about Julio Jones, you think about the physicality, just how strong he is. And CeeDee Lamb, there were guys that would hit him in the open field and he wouldn't move. And I think that's one of the things that was so eye-popping when you watched him play was in that game, CeeDee Lamb, he showed the speed down the field, down the sideline, but his ability to cut back against the grain and breaking tackles, it was just one of those things that it was so much fun to watch. His touchdown receptions. There was a 51-yard touchdown on a flea flicker. Got open behind the defensive backs, juked two backs, two defensive backs there, and then got to the outside, broke another tackle, and just really strong after the catch. Took it all the way to the pylon. There was another play out on the sideline, and broke 3 tackles, tiptoed down the sideline, showing a tremendous balance for a guy his size. So he has the power, he has the speed. He's not. Julio Jones ran a 4.39 at the combine. So when you're talking about a guy like Julio Jones, and that's one of the things that you really have to be careful with some of the comparisons, because you're going to say, well, Julio Jones ran that 4.39. He was, let's see, he did haul in, let's see, it was over 1,100 yards in his final season there at Alabama. But at the combine, let's see if I can find the numbers. 6'2", 220 pounds, ran that 4.39. Bench press, 17 reps at 225. The 3-cone drill, a 6.66. Just tremendous performance put on there by Julio Jones. But 6'3", 220, a little bit bigger than CD, but the physicality is there. That's one of the things that I think is so special. I mean, Julio Jones went number 6 overall to the Falcons. I'm looking at CeeDee Lamb and I'm saying, you know what? CeeDee Lamb should be a top 10 pick. And I think there's a good chance he could end up being number 6 in the draft and be that number 1 wideout taken over Jerry Jeudy, because for as good as Jerry Jeudy is, especially with the suddenness, getting in and out of the breaks, the physicality with which CeeDee Lamb plays, the attitude, his and also having that breakaway speed, I think we're only scratching the surface. I think this could be a very special wideout. To me, he's the Biletnikoff Award winner about midway through the season. So these guys are kind of playing catch up with him. Now, if CeeDee Lamb is the most physical receiver in this draft class, and Henry Ruggs is by far the most explosive, a guy who's going to take the top off of a defense, 6 foot, 190-pound junior. And look, he had 48 receptions, 741 yards, 11 touchdowns though in his sophomore season, and through 6 games, just under 400 yards, 5 touchdowns, but 21.9 yards per reception. Think about that. I mean, that's some explosive plays. Nearly 22 yards per catch. He's just a guy who is a human highlight reel. And when you look at his explosiveness, he is so quick coming off the ball that he gets to full speed in a hurry. And I'll be curious to see what he runs in that 40. We've already seen what Marquise Brown could do for the Ravens. And I'm looking at Henry Ruggs, and I'm thinking he's very much in that same caliber as Hollywood Brown. In the one of the games that I watched this week, Bama beat Texas A&M 47-28. Henry Ruggs had a 33-yard touchdown on a sluggo. I mean, a quick step inside, then release to the outside. Had Miles Jones, who's a really good corner for Texas A&M, but he's 6'4", trying to cover Henry Ruggs with all that speed, and just got him turned around. Speed to just run by him and score. So the route running, some of the suddenness there with Henry Ruggs, he's to me a guy who could end up being a top 15, top 16 pick when it's all said and done. I firmly believe that can definitely happen. Marquise Brown was taken number 25 overall by the Baltimore Ravens. I think Henry Ruggs could potentially be in the 15 to 20 range when it's all said and done. So those are my top three. I really don't think there's any question there. I think the only question is going to be, is it CeeDee Lamb or Jerry Jeudy taking number one in this receiver class? Beyond that, how about T. Higgins out of Clemson, 6'4", 205, the junior. This is a kid who, in just 6 games so far this year, 22.9 yards per reception, only 3 touchdowns, but a guy who is a threat to go the distance on any given play. The size, I think is really what jumps out to you. Like I said, 6'4", but he moves really well for a guy his size, a guy who can get deep. I'll be curious to see what his 40 time is. That's really going to be critical for him. Is he going to be a top 20 pick? It's going to come down to that 40 time. If he can break 4.5, then he's absolutely a first rounder. So T. Higgins as a sophomore, 59 receptions, 936 yards, and 12 touchdowns, catching passes from Trevor Lawrence in the national championship season for the Clemson Tigers. He's by far their best receiver. And a guy who just knows how to make plays down the football field. Catch radius is enormous. Just very reliable hands. And to me, I think T. Higgins has a good shot of being a top 20, top 25 pick. There's so much talent there at Clemson, so you really can't take a look at the numbers too much week in and week out. There's a lot of talent. You've got Justin Ross, and you got Amari Rodgers, and you got Travis Etienne coming out of the backfield. There are a lot of explosive playmakers there for Clemson, but T. Higgins, it all starts with him in the passing game. After that, there are a couple of question marks for different reasons. The first one is Laviska Shenault out of Colorado, 6'2", 220-pound junior. Some people compare him to Sammy Watkins, with the speed. I look at the physicality. Physicality reminds me of Juju Smith-Schuster. As a sophomore, 86 receptions, over 1,000 yards, 6 touchdowns, played in 9 games. And, during that time period, had 5 100-yard receiving games, one that went over 200 yards, but went down to injury, and that really slowed his season down. This season, struggling to stay healthy again. 5 games played, just 296 yards receiving, 2 touchdowns on 21 receptions. The thing with Laviska Shenault, I think that's going to be the biggest red flag, is the durability. He can't stay healthy. And for as good as a receiver can be, for as explosive as a receiver can be, if they can't stay healthy and can't stay on the field, ultimately, at the end of the day, he's no good to an NFL franchise. So Laviska Shenault is going to have to show that he is durable, that he can withstand the rigors of a 16-game season in the NFL. That's the biggest worry that I have for him. I think with Colorado and their offense, he runs a lot of those underneath routes. This is a guy who's going to do a lot of the dirty work. He's going to run a lot of crosses, a lot of drag routes, make guys miss in the open field, and then use that speed to run away from you. He's not a guy who's necessarily going to be asked to take the top off of a defense for the Buffaloes. So you'll be curious to see what that 40 time is going to be. Is he going to be able to showcase some speed, get under that 4.5 range, and really offer some of that explosiveness? You see him, as a threat to go the distance on any given play. But I think what's the most fun to watch is the physicality, the stiff arms, the leg drive, lowering his shoulder, running guys over. He's not just going to run by you. He'll run you over. He runs like a running back with the ball in his hands. And that's what makes Laviska Shenault so much fun to watch. And, in a game that I watched this past week, if you bear with me as you hear me flipping through my pages here of my notebook, Oregon, Colorado. Now Colorado got they got pounded 45-3. Laviska Shenault, 4 receptions, 70 yards in that game. Showing a really good job on a curl route, snapping off the route in front of the defensive backs. Hands catcher, settles down well in the zone. Finds an opening in the zone, and Montez shows his numbers to Steven Montez. adjusts well to the ball in the air, made a catch on a slant, and then plants and cuts to the outside to separate from the defensive backs. Inside go route, ran by the corner, 36-yard gain. Um, he's somebody to me when I watch him play. I'm just waiting for him to have a breakout game and just really explode. But he's not always a guy who's going to take the top off of a defense, because they've got guys like Tony Brown and Katie Nixon who are more or less going to be featured in that way. Now, the other guy who potentially has a chance at the first round, in my opinion, is going to be Jalen Reagor out of TCU. 5'11", 195-pound junior, a guy who can play on the outside and in the slot. Really had a breakout 2018 season, 72 receptions, over 1,000 yards, 9 touchdowns on the season as well. Just really an explosive playmaker on the outside. This season through 5 games, just 15 catches, 186 yards, and 3 touchdowns. But here's the biggest thing that is a concern for me. This is a speed merchant, a guy who is dynamic with the ball in his hands, can make you miss, very sudden. He offers a lot in special teams as a punt returner, kick returner. So he's very sudden. But the problem is the hands. A lot of times in traffic, not always the most reliable. And he actually had a game this season where he had just 1 catch for 15 yards. So he tends to disappear at times during games. And when you're the number 1 wideout for your team, not only is the offensive coordinator going to try to find ways, Sonny Cumbie is going to try to find ways to get the ball in your hands, but then you also have to make sure that when your number is called, that you're making those plays for your quarterback and your team. And the fact is you take a guy like this, you can run all the routes that you want, create some separation, but if you're going to be playing in traffic, you've got to show some good hands. You've got to be able to hold on to the football. And Jalen Reagor, I think contact is one of those things that you worry about with him. Is he going to be able to be a reliable receiver and be consistent? If you can get the ball in his hands, he'll be dynamic in the open field. But the question is can you count on him when you need him? Now, the flip side, you have a guy like Tylan Wallace out of Oklahoma State, the Blitnikoff Award finalist from a season ago, 6 foot, 185-pound junior. In the season last year, 86 receptions, just under 1,500 yards. That's 17.3 yards per reception, 12 touchdowns, 7 100-yard games, and 2 200-yard games. Those were both against Texas and OU. Had basically 10 receptions for over 220 yards and 2 touchdowns in each of those games. This guy's just a smooth, fluid athlete, a guy who is reliable, has excellent hands, and just knows how to get open. Very sudden, a guy who I think could play in the slot. I don't know that his 40 time that he'll test all that well. I think he's going to end up sliding into day 2, but a guy who I think is going to be a reliable wideout. He's not like James Washington. James Washington was a guy who was going to be more explosive. I think Tylan Wallace to me just seems like he's a smooth receiver, not the most explosive guy in the world, but a guy who I look at as a very reliable receiver, a guy who's going to go up and win some 50-50 balls, knows how to run his routes, knows how to to really sell the route. And to me, I look at him as a definite early round 2 pick, as is DeVonta Smith out of Alabama. Now, look, if you saw the game against Mississippi, this was a guy who took the top off the Rebels defense there. 11 receptions, 274 yards, and 5 touchdowns. I mean, that's 25 yards of reception. He was busting off runs or receptions for 70 and 80 yards. Really a guy, I think the route running is what sets him apart. When you talk about Jerry Jeudy, you have the explosiveness and to get vertical, but also the suddenness with his route running. Henry Ruggs, more known for the speed vertically. I think DeVonta Smith, very reliable hands, but a guy who also knows how to get open with his route running. And he's somebody to me that I look at. I don't know that he'll ever be a number 1 wideout, but he's definitely a guy who is going to be a nice complementary receiver. He's already doing that at Alabama, sharing the love with Jeudy and Henry Ruggs. And in that game against A&M, if I can find that game here in my notepad. 7 receptions, 99 yards, and a touchdown in that game. And like I said, just showed excellent hands on the perimeter. He catching quick passes. There was a nice stop and start to make the defenders miss. So he knows what to do to when the ball's in his hands to make defenders miss. Route running, knows how to get open, excellent hands. I see DeVonta Smith and Tylan Wallace being two guys that are going to be early day 2 selections. Which brings me to a pair of, they're not brothers, but they're both last name of Johnson, and they're both seniors. Tyler Johnson of Minnesota and Collin Johnson of Texas. We'll start with the latter, Collin Johnson, 6'6", 220 pounds. The senior has only played in 3 games this year, slowed by injury a season ago, really a breakout junior year, 68 receptions, just under 1,000 yards, 7 touchdowns, had 3 100-yard receiving games in that season. This year, like I said, slowed by injury, coming back, played against OU, and struggled a little bit, had to shake off some of the rust, but you can see the talent is absolutely there. This is a guy who can high point the football, big, physical, huge catch radius. There was a nice fingertip catch that he had, kind of double clutched it a little bit in that game against OU, but absolutely showed off some of his hands, able to fully extend for the football. A guy who I think has a flair for the acrobatic a little bit, a guy who can make catches along the sideline and then very physical after the catch as well. So, I think Collin Johnson, the question is going to be, can he separate? That's going to be the big issue, the big question. But that was the thing that a lot of people said about Alshon Jeffrey. Could he separate? Could he really be a dynamic receiver in the league, in the NFL? And the answer to that obviously is yes. Alshon Jeffrey has been a leading target there for the Eagles for a number of years. So Collin Johnson, the question is going to be just how fast is he? What's he going to run? Is he going to be in the 4.6 range? Can he drop that speed a little bit? 6'6", 220 pounds. He looks almost like a tight end. A guy like Darren Waller was around that size coming out of Georgia Tech. He's made the transition to the tight end position and just signed a nice extension there with the Raiders. Collin Johnson is one of those guys I think will end up being a day 2 pick. I think he'll probably end up falling to the 3rd round. I don't think he's going to run the fastest 40. Because of that, guys end up falling. But he's somebody who, like I said, can be physical. If he ends up adding some weight, if he's 6'6", 245 pounds, he'd be a very mean tight end. But we'll see where things take him. Now, Tyler Johnson, out of Minnesota, he's going to end up being Minnesota's all-time leading receiver when it's all said and done. 6'2", 205 pounds. A season ago, 78 receptions, over 1,100 yards, 12 touchdowns, 6 100-yard receiving games in that season. So far this year, 459 yards and 5 touchdowns in 6 games. Tyler Johnson, his concentration is a little suspect. I think it's kind of a red flag for me. Had such a great year last year, really expecting him to be one of the top wideouts in this year's draft class. But here's the problem that I have with Tyler Johnson. He makes the difficult catch look easy. But the lack of concentration on some of the easy catches, when your quarterback, Tanner Morgan, is hitting you in stride on a slant route and the ball goes through your hands, obviously you've got an issue there with the concentration, but that's just one example, running easy, wide open routes and the ball goes through his hands. That inconsistency is absolutely a red flag. I don't care what type of routes, like I said earlier, I don't care what type of routes you run. I don't care how fast you are. If you can't catch the football, you're not going to be in the league very long. Remember Stephen Hill? He was, I believe, a 2nd-round pick of the New York Jets coming out of Georgia Tech. Vertical threat for days, had speed for days, 6'4", 6'5", just looked like a gazelle running out there. Problem was the guy couldn't catch. And that was really, his downfall. Only played a couple of years in the league. So, to me, Tyler Johnson, Yes, he's an absolute, can be a beast out there, a very reliable receiver a season ago. A guy who knows how to get open, runs his routes really well, can be a weapon in the red zone, but this season not as reliable. He's a guy who is making the more the difficult catches, but let's focus on making the right catches. Even the easy ones. Secure the ball, then look to get upfield. That's something that I think he's going to have to, prove me wrong, prove others wrong. In terms of his pass catching. A lot of people have him rated a lot higher than I do in this year's draft class, and I think a lot of that is going towards some of that flair for the dramatic, but that concentration. That's really what worries me for him. Now, Justin Jefferson really having a breakout year. 6'3", 192 pounds out of LSU. He's kind of become one of Joe Burrow's favorite targets. He and Jamar Chase. A season ago, 54 receptions, 875 yards, 6 touchdowns. Had 2 games over 100 yards, but scored a touchdown in each of his last two games of the season. And then, through 6 games this year, 40 catches, over 600 yards, 8 touchdowns, 4 games over 100 yards. Touchdown in all but one game. And when you look at that, you think about what LSU has been doing, and Justin Jefferson being the main target. Everyone's talking about Joe Burrow. We'll get back to Justin Jefferson here in a second, but CeeDee Lamb, let's get back to him real quick. I talked about him being the touchdown maker. He has scored a touchdown in every game this season. When you think about that, he's been the main gun, the target, but he hasn't always been, the featured receiver this year. But he's a guy who just continues to build momentum. And I'll stop talking about CeeDee Lamb now because we're talking about Justin Jefferson now. But really a similar receiver. 6'3", 192, but very solidly built. A guy who can run away from defenders, but also very physical, runs through tackles. And, that's one of the things for me that really stood out in the game against Florida. Going against C.J. Henderson at times, also Marco Wilson. He was really going up against some top-notch corners, but he was a guy who just always seemed to, on his in cuts, able to find spots in the zone, ball thrown out in front of him, excellent catch and on the move and cutting up the field. Showed an ability to high point the football and haul it in right in front of Sean Davis, the safety, on another play. Crossing route from the slot, cut into the opening of the zone, catch in stride, tiptoe down the sideline, 36 yards. Fought through Trey Dean on another play. To the inside, right at the pylon, 7-yard. That reminds me, it was a 7-yard touchdown. Wound up opening up. He got to the pylon, kind of did a reverse pivot, and opened himself up to Joe Burrow, who was rolling out, and threw the ball to him, and used his big body, shielded the defender away from the football. Ball was thrown to the outside towards the pylon, extends for the football, makes the catch before he's shoved out of the end zone. That ball did cross the plane, ended up being a touchdown. That's just one of the things that you look at with him is the body positioning, the strength, the physicality, his ability to, he opens up, shows the quarterback his numbers, that reverse pivot, really put that, using a basketball style move there, really putting that defensive back on his back hip and allowing him to then go out and attack the football in the air. Look, if you want to make a name for yourself at the next level, you've got to be a guy who's attacking the football in the air. And that's one of the things that all of these guys that I've mentioned so far do very well. And they know how to use their body, especially the bigger receivers, know how to use their body to position themselves to make a play. Speaking of big bodies, here are 2 guys, very different points in their career, who are 2 of my favorite players to watch. Sage Surratt out of Wake Forest and Michael Pittman out of USC. We'll start with Sage Surratt. He's a redshirt sophomore, only played 2 seasons for the Demon Deacons, 6'3", 215 pounds as a freshman, 41 catches, over 580 yards, 4 touchdowns. So far through 6 games this year, 46 catches, 711 yards, 9 touchdowns, a touchdown in every game, much like CeeDee Lamb, 4 games with over 100 yards receiving. And in the loss to Louisville this past week, where Wake Forest went down, had their first defeat, to the hands of their ACC rival there in Louisville, where they lost 62-59, 12 receptions, 196 yards, 3 touchdowns. This is a big-bodied kid, a guy on the outside, a guy, a weapon in the red zone for sure, but a guy who can high point the football, a guy who has good speed to outrun guys on the outside. He's a guy who's just going to continue to get better and better. He's a guy right now I think would be a day 2 selection if we were to have the draft today and he comes out. But I'm hoping that Sage Surratt sticks around for one more year. I think he'll be a first-round pick in next year's draft. He'll be one of the guys that we talk about as a top wideout for the 2021 draft. So I'm hoping that he does come back. But if he does come out, big physical guy, I'll be curious to see what he runs. If he runs sub 4.5, we talked about the issues with Jalen Reagor, Laviska, Shenault. Sage Surratt might be sliding up into that conversation. He's one of those bigger receivers who also has speed. I don't know, but I think if he and Jamie Newman come back to Wake Forest and they could do something special with Dave Clawson. They're already doing a fantastic job there, 5-1 on the year, but I think next year could definitely be their year as well. Now, Michael Pittman, on the other hand, is a senior wide out there for USC, 6'4", 220 pounds. And, man, I'll tell you what, the game against Utah, 10 receptions, 232 yards, and a touchdown. He was a guy, and you watch him last year, you watch him this year, high pointing the football, a guy who's going to go up and attack the football in the air, gets late separation at times. Sometimes there's no separation, but he's going to climb the ladder, and the physicality after the catch. He's going to go up and outmuscle any defensive back in college football. I don't think there's anybody, if he's going to attack the football in the air, I don't know that there's a guy who's going to outmuscle him for a football. I don't know that there's anyone, in the at the cornerback position at least, that's going to outmuscle him as he's carrying the football. You better rally on the back end if you want to bring this guy down. He's so strong, so physical. And look, teams are really daring USC to run. BYU did it, Washington did it, Notre Dame did it. Those are the 3 losses for USC. Utah did not. They were looking to play man, and ultimately Michael Pittman made them pay down the football field. But they're playing the 2 high safeties, a lot of underneath routes, guys on the interior. They were allowing Amon-Ra St. Brown and Tyler Vaughns to beat him. They were not going to let Michael Pittman get down the field. They were playing 2 high safeties and really shading his way the entire game. When you talk about receivers and you talk about respect, they were basically putting a game plan up to make sure that Michael Pittman was not going to beat them. If they're going to beat him, it's going to be with the run game. It's going to be with the shorter passing game. They're going to go to Amon-Ra St. Brown. They're going to go to Tyler Vaughns. Michael Pittman is not going to beat us. That's some respect. That's one of the things, if I'm looking at as a defensive coordinator, this is the guy that I don't want to have beat me. There's something that he's doing right. There's something, when you talk about that, that's something that teams should be taking notice of. And I think Michael Pittman should be a day 2 pick. He may fall to day 3, but I think he should be a day 2 pick. I think he'll probably end up being a 3rd rounder, possibly fall to the 4th round. If he falls any further than that, I think the NFL teams are crazy. Because I think Michael Pittman can absolutely play at the next level. And he's another one who, because of his physicality, because he is so big, you look at what Darren Waller's been able to do at the tight end position. I look at Michael Pittman and his physicality. He's bigger than safeties. He's bigger than corners, and he's faster than linebackers. Mismatch, across the board there. So, if I'm calling Johnson Michael Pittman, you know what? I may look at that tight end position and see what I can do, a la Darren Waller. Van Jefferson, guy that people haven't really been talking about too much. 6'2", 197 pounds. Was at Ole Miss for his first 2 years. Transitioned to Florida in his junior and senior seasons. The son of former San Diego Charger Sean Jefferson. And I'll tell you what, look, Van Jefferson is just a polished wideout. This is a guy who, not the most flashy guy by any means. And if you look at his numbers, they're not going to be eye popping, but you watch him, he's just a savvy veteran. And that's one of the things I look at him and the way that he plays. It's like watching Terry McLaurin play. A guy that people didn't really talk about, but he's going to rise up draft boards. And here's the thing. If you watched him against LSU, he was making guys look silly. I mean, he had a couple of plays there where he just had Derek Stingley, the freshman, the fantastic freshman there for LSU, had him turned around. There was a stutter off the line, release quick to the outside, gets Stingley to actually turn his shoulders and square his shoulders to the sideline as if he's going to turn and run with him. And then he basically crosses and runs a quick slant instead. Really had Stingley turned around, and just an excellent route. Ended up running for 12 yards on that particular reception. Only a 2-yard touchdown on another play, but plant that outside foot to the outside. Got Derek Stingley shading to that side, and then cuts really quickly to the inside, and was a hands catcher too. I mean, the ball was thrown out in front of him, catches with his hands, ends up taking a hit from Michael Divinity on that touchdown. But both of his touchdowns, the other touchdown I believe was a 7 or 6 yard reception, and ball thrown out in front of him. The first touchdown was actually a back shoulder throw, and really extended for the football away from the defender, and showed tremendous hands. So the route running ability, the way to set up his man, and he's going against some high level corners and was really making them look silly at times with his route running. To me, I think Van Jefferson is one of the more underrated receivers in this year's draft class. And I think when it's all said and done, he's the guy who should be creeping up draft boards a little bit. Terry McLaurin went in round number 3. I think Van Jefferson could be the same. How about Denzel Mims out of Baylor? 6'3", 215 pounds, big time playmaker for Baylor there. Charlie Brewer, the quarterback, this is his go-to guy. 32 receptions, over 500 yards, 5 touchdowns on the year. Really having another breakout season, really. As a freshman, 61 receptions, over 1,000 yards, 8 touchdowns. Kind of a down year for him, just under 800 yards as a sophomore. And, he's really having a breakout year in 2019. A dynamic playmaker out on the outside. Can be big, physical, high points of football, huge catch radius. He's a guy to keep an eye out for, as is Bryan Edwards out of South Carolina. 6'3", 215 pounds. This is a guy, I feel like he's been at South Carolina forever. 196 receptions in his career. Let's see, 2,800 yards receiving, 20 touchdowns in his career. Georgia knew just what they were dealing with Bryan Edwards. They were trying to take him away at times, but at the end of the day, with that game, Georgia, South Carolina ended up beating Georgia 20-17 in double overtime. In that game, Bryan Edwards, 6 receptions, 78 yards, and a touchdown. And if I go to my notes here, really, deep cross over the middle, able to go down and haul in the pass. Another play of the 46-yard touchdown, an out and up, beat the corner with that double move, and then showed the speed to go to the distance, but also very strong over the middle. That's one of the things that you're looking for. Guys that aren't afraid to go over the middle, guys that aren't going to get the alligator arms, hear the footsteps. Very strong, physical player. A guy is going to absorb contact. Unfortunately, had an ankle injury there in the third quarter, but he's somebody to me I think is going to be a reliable target and one of those guys who I think is going to be on an NFL roster for quite a long time just because of his consistency at the position. Aaron Fuller out of Washington. A lot of people are really high on this guy. 5'11", 188 pounds. Um, let's see, through 7 games, 538 yards receiving, 5 touchdowns, have 4 touchdowns, a season ago. Aaron Fuller, to me, he has a flair for the acrobatic catch, but he's another guy I've also seen him have quite a few drops. And it's one of those things to where Jacob Eason, you look at some of the completion percentage, and he struggled with some drops with his receivers. And Aaron Fuller is one of those guys who, at times, he'll make a great catch, show off some good separation, from receiver or from the DB, but he has his share of drops. And I think there was one catch that he had where it was a one-handed catch up over his head, but again, ball hits him right in the hands and he drops it. Has had his share of drops. That's going to be something that is definitely going to be cause for concern. Now, Miles Boykin really kind of blew up at the combine. Was a guy who was really a downfield threat for Notre Dame. One of my favorite receivers in last year's draft. You have Chase Claypool this year, 6'4", 229 there for Notre Dame, just under 400 yards receiving this year with 4 touchdowns through 6 games to this point. Another big-bodied receiver. I just don't think he has the explosiveness that Miles Boykin does. He's a guy who's going to be more of a possession receiver, not really a guy who can stretch the defenses. Big body guy. He's another guy who I could see transitioning to tight end. I mean, he's already 6'4", 230 pounds. He has Darren Waller written all over. I mean, that's the thing. The way that the game is going, some of these bigger tight ends, you look at Evan Ingram is another example, a guy who's just really a big wide receiver. And Darren Waller was a receiver at Georgia Tech. So I think that's why some of these bigger receivers, it's really easy to talk about, hey, possibly transitioning to the tight end position. And I'll give you two final names at the wide receiver position. The first one's going to be James Prochet out of SMU, 6 foot, 193 pounds. Prochet is a guy who is honestly the model of consistency. A guy who just always seems to be making plays for SMU. Going through my notes to see if I can find. I know I ended up watching a game of his here not that long ago. But I think it was last week. In any event, this is a guy who has absolute, really good body control in the air, very sudden with his route running, able to separate over the top, deep out route, snapping off the route, really does a good job flattening his route, making it easy for the quarterback to deliver the football to him. I just see my notes over and over. Excellent route, excellent feet, able to leap and high point the football, good body control around the sideline. Prochet, he was there all 4 years there at SMU making plays. Just under 1,200 yards receiving a season ago with 12 touchdowns. Through 6 games this year, 45 catches, 29 yards, 7 touchdowns. He's going to go over 1,000 yards for the second year in a row, catching passes from Shane Buechele. 235 receptions in his career for over 3,200 yards and 31 touchdowns. Prochet, to me, is a guy, he probably isn't going to be a day 2 pick. He'll probably be a guy right around the probably early day 3, 4th, 5th round range, but a guy who I think could be a playmaker for an NFL franchise. Don't sleep on James Prochet. And then finally, Antonio Gandy-Golden from Liberty, the Flames. Hugh Freeze, this is one of the nation's leading receivers. 34 catches, 728 yards. That's 21.4 yards per reception and 5 touchdowns. He had 71 catches last year. He's already halfway there to that point. almost already eclipsing the 1,037 yards he had from a season ago and 10 touchdowns. Had four 100-yard receptions a season ago. I'm sorry, 400. Four 100 yards games a season ago. Two of which went for 200 yards. So far this year, 100 yards in four of the six games. 6'4", 220 pounds. A guy who is, again, another big-bodied receiver, but a guy who is very smooth, has a huge catch radius, a guy who's going to be a weapon in the red zone for you, but a guy who, has the body control along the sideline, works the sidelines very well, a guy who isn't afraid to go over the middle, and a guy who can make plays down the field as well. He's from one of the smaller schools in FBS, but a guy that you really want to watch. Buckshot Calvert, Stephen Calvert is quarterback. He and Gandy-Golden having really a nice year there for the Liberty Flames. Someone to really keep an eye out for as the season progresses. I figure he'll be in some of the all-star games. Hopefully he'll get an invite to the Senior Bowl. I really want to see what he would do against some of the top flight corners at the Senior Bowl. That's really where some of these guys from some of the smaller schools can really make some money at the next level. So those are the receivers that I really wanted to talk about, and I'm leaving out guys like Devin Duvernay. Duvernay was a guy, let's talk about him. Devin Duvernay, when Collin Johnson went out, he really put the team on his back. I think he had a 16 reception day. 9 receptions a game, leads FBS receivers. Sudden as a kick returner, very reliable target, a weapon, over the middle, very sudden with his route running, excellent balance through contact and down the sideline, 5'11", 210 pounds, very solidly built, and a guy for me, I think he's going to be someone to keep an eye out for, probably a day 3 pick, but somebody who I think can end up helping an NFL team. So those are the receivers. Now that we've gotten everything, there's some other receivers that I'm leaving out there, but we'll make sure to circle back as the season progresses, talk about some of the additional receivers. So what I saw this last weekend, week 7, so that's the week of October 5th. I'm sorry, that not the week of October 5th. Starting October 9th, Wednesday, October 9th, Appalachian State and the Louisiana Lafayette, or Louisiana as they're really known by now. 17-7 winners, the Appalachian State Mountaineers. Really the guy that I was watching was Davis Gaither. Takeem Davis Gaither had 10 tackles, a half a sack, 2.5 tackles for loss. He just flies around to the football. He's only 6'2", 215 pounds, but someone who is very just so athletic. He's got tremendous length and good instincts. Just seems to really be flying to the ball. Excellent range, sideline to sideline. There was a screen to the receiver. Was able to run inside the receiver block, inside out. Able to drop the receiver for a loss behind the back. In the backfield. Ran in phase down the field, making a play. Read a screenplay as well. Just really, no hesitation. Came straight down. The problem was he didn't really didn't break down. Ultimately ended up missing the tackle. But he likes to stick his nose in the hole. Gets low. Wraps up the running back. In this case, it was Elijah Mitchell. Really planted him on the ground. Davis Gaither is going to be a guy. Probably going to be a mid-day 3 pick, but one of those linebackers who can be a 3-down linebacker because he can drop into coverage. He can rush the quarterback a little bit. Excellent against the run. Scrapes over the top, to make plays on the outside. He's a little undersized, but that's okay. That's really where the game's going. A lot of these undersized linebackers, are guys that NFL teams are really taking a look at. Running back wise, Trey Regis, he's only a junior, 5'10", 220 pounds. I think he's coming back for the Raging Cajuns. He and Elijah Mitchell, who's 5'11", 217 pounds. Elijah Mitchell shows that he has some a burst, also some physicality, but he's kind of stiff in the hips. I look at Trey Regis. He's really the guy that I like watching play. The vision to see the hole open up. puts his foot in the ground, no real wasted movement, bursts through the hole, really a one cut and go type of a guy. Trey Regis, really fun to watch, number 9 there for the Raging Cajuns. Now for Appalachian State, Victor Johnson, the 6'5", 295-pound left tackle, does a good job generating movement in the running game. To some degree, the pad level gets too high though in the passing game. He's a raw tackle, probably going to be a late day 3 pick. Going to be more of a developmental prospect than anything else. NC State taking on Syracuse. NC State with the win, 16-10. Really wanted. This is my first chance to see Larrell Murchison. Six tackles, 2 sacks in the game. Showing in a short area burst to close to the quarterback. Was beating the left tackle off the edge, really using his hands to get off the block. I think that's one of the things that stood out to me was his ability to use those hands, kind of toss the left tackle aside at times, turning the corner, chasing after the quarterback, showing excellent effort. Had 6 sack in the game, which was tied for the most in the ACC. So Larrell Murchison is a guy whose draft stock is continuing to rise, in my opinion. And then I watched Alton Robinson and Kendall Coleman play. These are 2 guys. You're waiting for them to really have a breakout game, but you watch the 2 of them. Coleman had a half a sack, quarterback hurry. Robinson 2 tackles, a tackle for loss, and a quarterback hurry as well. With Robinson, he uses the rip move. Very quick, turn in the corner, flattens out, getting to the quarterback pretty quickly. Very athletic guy. Excellent effort. What was really crazy, it was a 12-second play, and really the quarterback was kind of running around. Bailey Hawkman. Ultimately, Kendall Coleman was able to chase him down and hit him as he throws, but Alton Robinson, I think, ended up on the ground twice during the play and was still pursuing the quarterback. So excellent effort, which is what you want to see. Let's see. Bench press a tight end on the edge and was able to come off and drop the running back for no gain there at the line. So he can play the run. Does a good job chopping the right tackle's hands and then able to rip through to get to the quarterback in a hurry. Just seemed to be a step slow getting to the quarterback. And then Kendall Coleman, chasing down the quarterback from behind, does a good job really, pursuing the football from the backside. Ran a stunt, really looped around, shot the gap. And that's where he chased down the quarterback for a sack, crashes down on the ball carrier, and then ultimately spun back outside to drop the running back for no gain. Those are 2 guys to really keep an eye out for Syracuse. Virginia taking on Miami. Hurricanes with the upset win, 17-9. In this game, Bryce Hall, who I think is one of the top 4 or 5 corners in this draft, was out on the punt cover team and got rolled up on and fractured his ankle. He's out for the year, but really a guy who can play both in press and zone. Led the nation a season ago in passes defended, and 6'1", 200 pounds. It's one of those things when I look at guys. I used to look at some of these injuries and say, all right, well, a guy like Miles Jack or Jalen Smith, they had those ACL injuries. They fell to round number 2. But you look at a guy like Jeffrey Simmons, a guy who was talked about in the top half of round number 1, tears his knee. Is he going to be available? Not playing at all in 2019. And guess what? He was still taken in round number 1. I think Bryce Hall probably going to be taken, in the back half of round number 1. But I think, if I'm Christian Fulton, if I'm Jeffrey Okudah, and Paulson Adebo, possibly even Sean Wade, kind of moving up a little bit, possibly passing him, possibly even CJ Henderson, although I think Bryce Hall might get the nod over CJ Henderson because Henderson has excellent cover skills, but he doesn't really tackle. That's something that we're going to talk about when we talk about the LSU game. But Bryce Hall, to me, just a guy that you want to have out on your football team, a guy who shows excellent effort, playing on special teams as well as on defense. Speaking of guys who play on both special teams and really on offense, in this case is Joe Reed, there for Virginia. Didn't talk about him when we were talking about receivers. 6'1", 215 pounds, very athletic in space. Told you there was going to be wide receivers that we leave out. But I think Joe Reed's a guy who could surprise, end up moving into day two, but I think he'll be an early day three pick. Does an excellent job working back to the football. When he catches the ball in space, can really plant and cut to avoid defenders, and can make some plays. Jordan Mack, 6'2", 230-pound inside linebacker, does a really good job blitzing the quarterback through the A gap. So he's a blitzer, plays the run really well. The big question mark for him is coverage. Can he drop into coverage? I think that's the same thing for Charles Snowden, the 6'7", 235-pound junior outside linebacker. I thought he did a really good job reading the screen, came downhill, and ultimately wasn't able to drop the running back for a loss, but ultimately shoved him, or really slowed him down for the other linebacker. I think it was actually Jordan Mack who got the tackle for loss on the running back. But Charles Snowden showing excellent instincts, explodes off the edge to rush the passer. Able to chase down DJ Dallas from behind for tackle for loss in the backfield as well. So I think Charles Snowden is the guy to watch, but I think he could probably use another year of seasoning, but because of his athleticism, could very well end up coming out. Talked about Oregon and their big win. Justin Herbert just really did an excellent job throwing where the pressure was coming from. Really, if the blitz was coming off the left-hand side, that's where he was going with the football, delivering just absolute dimes. Rolling to his left, rolling to his right, squaring his shoulders to his targets, putting the ball away from coverage. Big athletic guy. 38 games in his career with a touchdown. Just a guy who showed touch on the corner route, dropping the ball over the shoulder for his receiver in front of the safety and over the head of the linebacker. Justin Herbert really establishing himself as a top 2 or 3 quarterback, and should end up being a top 10, top 12 pick when it's all said and done. How about Davion Taylor, 6'2", 225-pound senior safety linebacker hybrid, very athletic, a guy who ran a 10,500 meters, so he's all Pac-12 sprinter. Actually chased down C.J. Verdell in a 72-yard run. Excellent speed, and I think that's one of the things. He has some pretty good instincts at the linebacker position, but speed kills, and that's one of the things that I think Davion Taylor is going to get drafted a lot higher than a lot of people expect. Steven Montez struggled mightily in this game. 6'5", 230-pound quarterback, threw 4 interceptions on 4 consecutive plays. Not all of them were his fault, but at the end of the day, just not making a lot of the throws that you wanted to see from him. And he's one of those guys that needs to have a good back half of the season, especially if some of those juniors decide that they're going to come back for their senior season. Steven Montez has a chance to move up, especially with the way that Nate Stanley, Shea Patterson have played this year. But Steven Montez, playing against the Pac-12's top team, in my opinion, really struggled to make plays, and that's really concerning going forward for him in terms of his draft stock. I know he's not a draft eligible this year, but Penei Sewell, 6'6", 325-pound sophomore, hadn't had a penalty called on him or given up a sack in his career until he finally got called for a holding penalty in this game, actually. But just an easy mover, a guy who has such light, he's so light on his feet, very, quick, choppy steps in pass protection, able to mirror the defensive end on the outside, quick power step to the inside to wall off an inside rush, generates incredible movement off the football, with that leg drive. He and Shane Lemieux, the guard, worked very, very well together. Lemieux I think is a top 5 guard. Some people don't have him rated as high because he does struggle with speed at times in the passing game, but very athletic as well, able to pull around, find the linebacker in the hole, get some kick out blocks on the outside, has good hips to seal off the linebacker as well. Calvin Throckmorton, to me, I thought might be the outside of obviously Sewell, but the top draft eligible tackle. One of the things for me with Throckmorton, he's played both tackle positions, a guard position, and the center spot. But I think he does struggle at times with speed. Plays with good leverage, definitely powerful in the running game. Actually drove his man into the end zone on a 1st and goal play from the 2-yard line. Just really drove the defensive end all the way into the end zone and ultimately buried him. Very physical there. Can mirror a little bit, has some good mirror skills, some decent lateral quickness, but again, he's going to get beaten at times with some speed. But I think his home is going to be at right tackle. He's got good pop in his hands. Really can be a road grader at the right tackle position, and a guy who has excellent experience. Jake Hansen, 6'5", 295, the center, played in, this is his 43rd start. Just played with excellent leverage. He was going up against the nose tackle, the big kid, Jalen Sami, the nose tackle, got under his pad level and basically just put him on his back in the run game. Just looks to finish you every chance he gets. So Jake Hansen, a guy for me at the center position, he's one of the top 4 centers in this year's draft. Obviously you have Beatis, you have Creed Humphrey, Daryl Williams of Mississippi State is right in that conversation as well. But I think Jake Hansen is right there. I think people are kind of overlooking him a little bit. Now in this game, we lost two playmakers. One is a sophomore, Javon Holland. He went down to injury, a knee injury, but the bigger injury was Jacob Breland, the 6'5", 250-pound senior tight end. Left knee injury, out for the year. And this was a guy who was just showing speed and ability to get down the field, be a weapon, be a go-to target, really the favorite target of Justin Herbert this year, and actually showed improvement as a blocker as well. He was really having the makings of one of the top tight ends in this year's draft. We'll see how that knee holds up, what he's able to do, how quickly he's able to recover. But I thought that that knee injury kind of hurt a little bit in terms of his overall draft stock, because we won't be able to see him really for the remainder of the year. In the OU Texas Red River rivalry, it was really a fun game to watch. 34-27. Alex Grinch's defense was really the story, and I think when you talk about that defense, 2 guys came to mind. Neville Gallimore, the senior at the nose guard position. Speed, man, he was beating Zach Shackelford left and right. The speed to just beat him inside off the ball. Very quick to get to the quarterback. Got a sack on one play. Drove Shackelford back off the football, showing some good speed to power. Beat Parker Braun, the guard, who I think is one of the better guards in this year's draft, with a quick move, a quick arm over. That's really his go-to, coming off the football, but also has that power to drive guys back into the backfield. Neville Gallimore, to me, is a day 2 pick at the defensive tackle position. Then there's Kenneth Murray. In the first half, he kind of disappeared in the second half at times, but in the first half, he just showed some very, some improved play, I thought. He was a volume tackler a season ago, but he was also, the gap integrity is really what he struggled with, but there's no questioning this guy's speed. The speed to get to the outside, there's really no hesitation, reading the run play, getting to the outside to the perimeter. And, he was covering from the opposite side. He was really on the other side of the line. Play, was going to the opposite sideline, and he was able to pursue that play, get all the way to that opposite sideline, and make a play on the football right around the line of scrimmage. To me, Kenneth Murray, 6'2", 234-pound junior, is a top 3 inside linebacker in this year's draft, should he decide to come out. Mentioned Parker Braun. I thought he had a decent game overall. 6'3", 300-pound senior, excellent power in his hands. Does a really good job sustaining his block in the running game, keeping those hands inside. Decent lateral quickness off of football as well. Got beat a couple of times, but I thought he played with a wide base. Good job, popping up and pulling around as a lead blocker, sealing off the edge. Really sealed off Ronnie Perkins on a 2-yard touchdown run in that game as well. Sam Ellinger, look, he struggled at times in that game, 6'3", 230 pounds, but I talked about it a week ago, just the grit, the determination, real gutsy performance, and he's so tough. A guy who just he pulls the ball, tucks it, and runs, and just showed some physicality whenever he was running with the football. Just really a lot of fun for me to watch him play. Let's see other games. What else can we talk about here? Giovanni Ricci, the tight end out of Western Michigan, got to watch Western Michigan play. 38-16 winners over the Miami of Ohio Red Hawks. Giovanni Ricci, 6'3", 240 pounds. This is a guy who I think probably might end up being an H-back at the next level. But 27 receptions, second in the MAC, and 6 receiving touchdowns, leads the MAC, and I think was actually tops among FBS tight ends at one point. But pretty good pass catcher, and a decent blocker, a little undersized, which is why I'm thinking if he's going to transition to the next level, it'd be at the H-back position. And then Levante Bellamy, the 5'9", 190-pound senior running back, 22 carries, 135 yards, 2 touchdowns in the game, 8 touchdowns on the year, leads the MAC. Just an explosive runner. Had 3 games over 100 yards so far this season. 6th leading rusher in the FBS. Very quick acceleration. Gets the top end speed in the open field in a hurry. Pretty good vision. Puts his foot in the ground and very sudden with his movements. Very quick feet on his cutbacks. So Levante Bellamy, one of those running backs is going to kind of fly under the radar, but a guy who could end up making an NFL roster. Mentioned South Carolina beating Georgia 20-17. I think Rodrigo Blankenship is going to get drafted. I hope that teams, look at this game. Yes, he did miss the field goal that ultimately, gave the Gamecocks the win. But I think Rodrigo Blankenship could end up being a 6th round pick in the draft. I think he's been consistent up to this point. Andrew Thomas, again, proving that he's the top tackle in the draft. 6'5", 320-pound junior. Leg drive in the generating movement in the run game. Has some long arms. Very easy mover laterally. Good lateral agility. Mirroring the defensive end. Standing the defensive end up as well. The change of direction, though. He's just so quick with his change of direction skills. Quick choppy steps and pass protection as well. Really stands out. DeAndre Swift, 7 yards per carry, which is first in the SEC. The leg drive, I think, was one of the things that you definitely saw. Very physical, breaking tackles, excellent balance, bursts through the hole, spins through contact. And then also a pass catcher, soft hands, catching footballs out of the backfield. 5'9", 215 pounds. He's, to me, along with Jonathan Taylor and Travis Etienne, one of the top 3 running backs in this year's draft. Let's see. Jake Fromm, 28-51, 295 yards, a touchdown, 3 interceptions. Really uncharacteristic. Hadn't thrown an interception in the season. Threw 3 of them. All of them ended up going to one guy, Israel Mukwamu, who had a 53-yard interception for touchdown. The 6'4", 205-pound sophomore. He's only a sophomore. That's a name to watch in 2021. Just tremendous length, tremendous ball skills, instincts, able to jump routes and undercut passes. Baited Jake Fromm into throwing some picks. Fromm, though, the poise in the pocket, his ability to read defenses, understanding where to go with the football, the ball placement, the anticipation, I still think Jake Fromm is a first round quarterback. I think when it's all said and done, you look at what he can do with the ball in his hands, and I think he's not going to wow you with a lot of the athleticism, which is why his stock could fall, and he may fall into day two. But the intangibles have to account for something. It's one of the things that everyone talked about with Daniel Jones. Is Daniel Jones was a product of David Cutcliffe, his ability to read defenses, know where to go with the football at all times, and Jake Fromm can absolutely do that. Javon Kinlaw, the 6'6", 310-pound defensive tackle. If you haven't gotten to watch number 3 for South Carolina, you've got to put on some tape. You'll be in for a treat. This is a guy, speed to power, so physical up front. The speed to power, the bull rush, just drove the right guard all the way back into the quarterback's lap. I think he stuns the interior lineman with his hands. Shows a pretty good quickness as well. Uses a nice rip or arm over to get to the quarterback, rushing the passer. To me, if you're looking for a defensive tackle and you're talking about first rounders, they've got to be able to both rush the passer and play the run. Javon Kinlaw, to me, is the number 2 defensive tackle at this point behind Derek Brown. Number 3, I got to watch against Clemson, and that's Marvin Wilson. Clemson did beat the Seminoles 45-14, but I thought Marvin Wilson just showed a really good job, with his speed. Quick burst off the ball, arm over to beat the center off the football. Showed a good job keeping his balance. Left guard tried to cut him, able to keep his balance. Got a hand up in the passing lane to knock the pass down. Very quick burst into the backfield, and then pursued down the line to ultimately disrupt the play as well. Didn't really get to the quarterback like you're expecting him to. Against Louisville, 10 tackles, 3.5 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, really put him on the map. That was September 21st. Since then, we haven't seen the consistency with him that I think Javon Kinlaw, but at the same time, I think Marvin Wilson is a guy who's going to be in consideration for a first round pick. So let's see. Hamza Nasruddin, the safety, 6'4", 215 pounds. Picked up the running back out of the backfield. Basically coming across the field and picked him up. Showed excellent range there as well. Got downhill to get to the quarterback, hitting the quarterback on an option play. Quarterback roll out to the right. Tried to hit the receiver up the sideline. And Hamza ultimately undercut the route. So Trevor Lawrence rolling out before he ends up going out of bounds, ended up throwing the ball down the field. Really didn't get all of it on, everything on the throw. Would have underthrown, I think it was Amari Rodgers down the sideline. But what Hamza did, he was in between obviously the quarterback and the receiver, kind of undercut the route. And he had actually stepped out of bounds, was able to get back in bounds, establish control, establish himself in the field of play, and then extended for the football. Ball was thrown pretty much almost out of bounds and was extending for it, had his toes inbound, excellent body control. This guy's a tremendous athlete. He's 6'4", 215 pounds. He's kind of that new wave safety linebacker combo. But I think if you're talking about that position, Isaiah Simmons, 6'4", 230 pounds. This guy's going to be a top 10 pick. Exceptional range. It was just absolutely ridiculous in this game. His ability to play sideline to sideline, quarterback flush from the pocket, rolled left, showed quick close. We're talking about, guys making plays. We talked about Kenneth Murray playing them from one side to the other. He was spying the quarterback on the complete opposite side of the line. Quarterback was flushed out. Like I said, rolled to the left. He was on the right side of the line. Pursued the quarterback all the way across, had that burst to the outside, hit the quarterback's arm as he was trying to throw. To me, Isaiah Simmons, that prototypical linebacker that you're going to be looking for, that new wave linebacker, 8 tackles, a sack, 2 tackles for loss, and a fumble recovery in the game. To me, he was the standout of the game overall. Travis Etienne, when I watch him play, he shows that, the ability to explode down the field, get through holes, spins through contact, shows some pretty good balance. And I have that. I have explodes through holes, ran through tackles, gets to the second level, 17 carries, 127 yards. And it's one of those things, that's the norm for Travis Etienne. At 5'10", 210 pounds, you don't think of him being physical, but I thought he had some physical runs in that game to go along with the speed. Alabama, we talked about what the receivers were doing. Jedrick Wilkes, the right tackle, showed really good power in his hands. Very physical guy on the right hand side. Alex Leatherwood showing lateral quickness. Showing a good job. Really that power step to the inside to wall off the defensive end on an inside rush. Then very fluid hips to get to the second level on another play. And then taking really good angles on his kick slide. I thought that he did a really good job sliding, getting, really cutting off the defensive end and then sitting down in pass protection, setting his feet, and really anchoring, getting underneath the pad level. I thought Alex Leatherwood solidifying himself as one of the top tackles in this year's draft, 6'6", 310 pounds. I think going into the year, I mentioned he was a guy that I was kind of expecting to play guard at the next level, but he's really established himself and shown and proven that he can play tackle. Raekwon Davis, I think, he's one of those guys, 6'7", 312 pounds, looks the part. He's really showing, that he can be disruptive. He quickly shows this arm over and bursts to get, to shoot through the A gap. Then he's able to really kind of extend that, long arm, the tackle, putting that, long arm right into the shoulder of the offensive tackle, and really able to use that to turn the corner on the outside, showing an ability to play both the run and the pass. Raekwon Davis really continuing to show more and more promise, and a guy that I think is really starting to turn some heads. A guy who I thought really was underplayed things a season ago, underachieved, and really having a breakout year this year. Notre Dame, USC going down to the Fighting Irish, 30-27. Cole Kmet, he had the collarbone injury, was out for 4 games. 6'5", 250 pounds. Really got to watch him. The route running was impressive. I thought that he showed excellent balance through contact. Ran a really nice wheel stop to separate from the linebacker on a 9-yard run. 9-yard pass reception. Excellent blocker. I think that's one of the things that we already knew about Cole Kmet, but he really showed some good athleticism, and I think that kind of established him as a top 4 or 5 tight ends in this year's draft, and he can only continue to improve as he gets more games under his belt. Julian Okwara, the 6'4", 248 pound stand-up rush end, very quick to flip his hips, turning the corner, beating the right tackle off the edge, chasing down the quarterback from behind in the pocket. I thought that was, really impressive as well. Khalid Kareem, the 6'4", 265 pounder. You've got the speed from Okwara. I think you got more physicality coming from Kareem, so I think they complement each other really well there for Notre Dame. I thought Tommy Kramer proved to be one of the top guards in the draft. 6'5", 319 pounds. Really able to get out and pull. Showed his own well there. Kick out block on Christian Rector, really getting out to the left, and got a pulling and got a nice kick out block there. I think that's one of the things. He's one of the better guards on the move, and that's really what stood out to me there. And then finally, we talked about LSU and Florida a little bit already. Joe Burrow just 21-24, 293, and 3 touchdowns. Just really knows where to go with the football. You saw the anticipation. Receivers were getting out of their breaks, and the ball was there. Just really throwing his receivers open, allowing them to make plays after the catch. Grant Delpit, making plays all over the place. This is why he's going to be a top 5 pick in my estimation. Tight coverage on receivers and tight ends. There was an excellent hit that he had on Kyle Pitts, who is going to be a first rounder. Mark my words, he'll be a first rounder in next year's draft. The 6'6", 240-pound sophomore tight end is just a mismatch on the outside. But Delpit was basically playing in the right up the hash, and Pitts kind of ran a skinny post and made the catch. And as he's starting to turn to make a football move, Delpit comes in, delivers a huge hit. Ultimately, kind of shook him up a little bit on the play, but lodged the ball free. Showed an ability. Like I said, playing in the box, coming downhill, dropping running backs in the backfield. Mentioned the cover skills. He was playing center field on another play. Middle of the field, quarterback with a pump to the outside. Really reads the route, anticipates the throw, starts to break before the quarterback even throws. Quarterback gets hit as he throws and comes over the top, nearly intercepting the pass. Like I said, in the box, beat the running back, drop the quarterback in the backfield for no gain. Another play, quarterback run to the outside, plays with outside leverage, gets to the outside, forces the quarterback inside, and got him over to Patrick Queen, who ultimately dropped him for no gain. Grant Delpit, phenomenal player. Kalavan Chason, first chance I'd gotten to see him play in a while. 6'4", 250-pound junior, so athletic. He had 3 tackles for loss and a sack, a guy who just bends so well coming off the edge. There was one where he kind of had this arc and really just ran around Storm Forsyth, the left tackle, and just the way he just kind of contorted his body as he was making the running that arc, and ultimately as he's getting closer to the quarterback, getting around that arc, it forced Storm Forsyth to hold him. Gets really low coming off the edge as well. I thought that was really impressive watching him turn the corner. Christian Fulton, the 6', 200-pound corner, one of the top 2 or 3 corners in the draft. Bail technique against Tyree Cleveland, the big wide receiver on the outside. Ultimately got on top of the route, eyes on the quarterback, stride for stride with the receiver, ultimately able to elevate. There was no way the receiver's coming down with the football there. Michael Pirine really struggling to, he worked hard for his few yards that he would get on the run plays. 17 carries for 65 yards, but he did have 2 receptions for 12 yards and a touchdown. I just like the way Michael Pirine runs. He always runs hard, always working hard for extra yards. 5'11", 218 pounds. The junior can catch the ball out of the backfield as well. I think his draft stock should improve. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, the 5'8", 209, showed a tremendous burst through the hole. The lateral quickness. There was a guy in the backfield and showing the jump cut to avoid him. There was another play where he ultimately scored. Linebacker in the hole, jump cut, gets to the outside, shoots through another gap and into the end zone. A guy, he's only a junior, but Edwards-Helaire, I wouldn't be surprised if he decides to come out and enter the draft. He'll be one of those guys that people are talking about, and you'll see his draft stock really rise. I got to put him in my top 10 now at this point. I really don't care. I got to get him in my top 10. 13 carries, 134 yards, 2 touchdowns. First chance I got to watch him really play this year, and I was impressed, especially against that Florida defense. So those were really the guys that stood out to me on the games that I got to watch. So last thing that we're going to go ahead and do before we go ahead and call it a podcast, we're going to take a look at week 8. What matchups, should we be keeping an eye out for? What am I going to be watching? If we look at it, Clemson going to Louisville coming off the 62-59 win against Wake Forest. Can they hand Clemson their first loss 1 week after handing the Demon Deacons their first loss? OU playing host to West Virginia. It's homecoming for Jalen Hurts and company. Tune in and watch Hurts and CeeDee Lamb and company just have a field day there against West Virginia. Neil Brown's team, they're another year or two away before really making an impact there in the Big 12. Wisconsin at Illinois. I think Jonathan Taylor is going to run all over that Illinois defense. Let's see, Iowa taking on Purdue. I just like to watch Iowa play to really get a chance to watch Tristan Wirfs, the right tackle. Houston against Connecticut. It's on ESPNU. It's an 11 o'clock game. Doesn't seem to be all that exciting on paper, but when you talk about Houston, you're watching the left tackle, Josh Jones. I think one of the better tackles, so fluid, 6'7", 310 pounds, very athletic. And then UConn, I haven't had a chance to watch Matt Pert play yet, the 6'7" offensive tackle there. But I definitely want to tune in and watch that game. I hope you get to check it out. If not, then stay tuned for next week's podcast as I go ahead and break him down just a little bit. So we move forward. LSU going into Starkville to take on Mississippi State. See what Joe Burrow and company can do against that Mississippi State defense. Pac-12 matchup. Two ranked teams. Oregon heading up to Seattle to take on Washington. I think Oregon has the momentum. You're going to see them running a lot more behind that offensive line, but that's what makes Oregon so dangerous is they also have Justin Herbert throwing the football. If this team played against Auburn again, I think Oregon would have a field day against Auburn. That's just my opinion. Let's see. Michael Warren, one of the more underrated running backs in the country. And the 21st ranked Cincinnati Bearcats taking on Tulsa. Tulsa's defense is no slouch. With Cooper Edmiston and Zaven Collins there at the linebacker position. Baylor heading to Stillwater to take on Oklahoma State. Upset alert there. The 18th ranked Baylor Bears, Matt Rule and company. Charlie Brewer. If you haven't gotten a chance to watch James Lynch, the defensive end, he's very, very fun to watch. A physical defensive end guy who you're going to see drive guys back into the backfield. Another set of ranked opponents here. ASU traveling to Rice-Eccles Stadium to take on the Utah Utes. Number 17 Sun Devils taking on 13th ranked Utah. That'll be a fun game to watch. Eno Benjamin there for ASU. Zach Moss, if he's healthy there against Utah. Let's see, what else do we have? Night games, you got Michigan, number 16th ranked Michigan Wolverines. Their defense is really playing well. They'll take on Penn State, number 7 in the country. You really want to watch their defense take on Michigan's offense. Michigan with Hassan Haskins really running the football a lot better. But that O-line is going to have to deal with that vaunted Penn State defense. I think, defensive front, you got Shaka Tony on the outside, especially you have Yetur Gross-Matos, and then, Robert Windsor at the defensive tackle position. And then, of course, at the linebacker, you've got Micah Parsons, the sophomore phenom there for Penn State. I think the Lions get the job done there. Alabama with a late game against Tennessee. Watch Tua and company, throw the ball all over Tennessee in that game. And Boise State, 14th ranked Broncos, Hank Bachmeier and company taking on BYU. BYU, taking on the likes of, taking down USC, nearly beat. Washington played tough against Utah as well. So that'll be an interesting game to watch. 9:15 Central Standard Time for that game. So those will be some of the games that I'm going to be tuning into. And we'll go ahead and recap those next week. We'll also be taking a look at the running back position and tight ends. Who are some of the top running backs? Who are the guys that are going to be flying under the radar? And then also the tight end position. The game's changing. And I think with the game changing, you have a lot more running backs, guys that are going to be catching the football out of the backfield. Those are guys that you want to see at the running back position. But at the same time, you look at a team like San Francisco, the way that they're running the football with Tevin Coleman and Matt Breida, there are going to be teams that are going to want to start copying. It's a copycat league, so you may see some of that as well. So if that's going to happen, Breida and Tevin Coleman catch the football out of the backfield, but they're running really hard as well. So you're going to have to find guys that are going to fit those types of offenses. We'll break that down a little bit. We'll take a look at the tight end position and who are some of the guys that are really emerging. There's going to be a guy from a small school that we'll be talking about. I'm going to make sure I get my hands on some game film before we talk about the tight ends. So stay tuned for that as well. So I hope everyone enjoys their weekend. I know I will. I'll be watching my college football. I'll be enjoying things, taking my notes, and we'll stay tuned for next week. We'll do it all over again. So for ReadyForTheDraft.com, this has been the Ready for the Draft podcast. I've been your host, Gregg Schutze. Until next time, take care, everyone, and I am out of here.